Workers at the animal rescue believed he was simply another discarded canine, silent, overlooked, and heartbroken, until a recognizable person walked up to his cage. Suddenly, his eyes welled with tears. The events that unfolded in those next moments left everyone at the facility speechless, creating a memory none of them would ever erase. But first, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button. And honestly, I'm really interested, what part of the world are you watching from? Leave your country in the comments below. I absolutely love discovering how widely our stories reach. Okay, let's dive right in. That morning brought an unusual calm to the rescue facility, the type of quietness where every little noise seemed amplified. Tucked away in the furthest corner kennel was a German Shepherd, his head hanging low, eyes vacant and dim. A fresh cut across his snout served as a painful reminder of a history nobody at the shelter fully understood. For days, the workers had attempted to spark some life in him, bringing treats and speaking in gentle tones, yet nothing could penetrate his despair. No barking escaped him, no growling either. He simply remained motionless, as if anticipating something that would likely never arrive. The scent of cleaning solution lingered in the air. Overhead, buzzing fluorescent bulbs mixed with the distant sounds of other dogs calling out. Yet within his enclosure, he existed in complete isolation, wordless, motionless, drowning in his own grief. Not a single staff member realized that before evening came, this very same dog would shatter his silence in the most unexpected way. The entrance bell rang softly as a gentleman entered the rescue center. He stood tall with broad shoulders, wearing a jacket weathered by years of service, the type of garment that spoke of lengthy days and demanding labor. His gaze swept methodically across the kennel rows, studying each animal's face without uttering a word. Upon reaching the distant corner, he came to a halt. Beyond the metal bars, the German Shepherd raised his head for the first time in many hours. Their gazes connected, and something profound transformed the atmosphere, a silent understanding that nobody else present could identify. The gentleman bent down slightly, placing his hands on his knees. Initially, he remained quiet, simply observing. The dog's ears flickered, his stare intense and unwavering. From behind the front counter, a volunteer took notice. "How odd," she murmured to a colleague nearby. "He hasn't responded to a single person this entire week." Yet in that frozen moment, neither the man nor the dog appeared conscious of anyone else around them. Their universe had compressed to just the distance separating them, and it seemed as though they had shared this space before. The German Shepherd crept closer, his paws moving carefully and purposefully across the chilled concrete surface. His focus remained fixed on the man's features, studying every characteristic as though verifying a distant memory. The gentleman dropped to one knee, moving nearer to the metal barrier. "Hello there, boy," he spoke gently, his tone blending comfort with amazement. Something sparked within the dog's expression, remembrance. The shepherd's ears stood upright, and his tail offered a tentative wag, marking the first sign of life since his arrival at the shelter. Then, as though an unseen barrier had dissolved, he pushed his snout through the bars toward the man's outstretched hand. The man's fingertips shook slightly as they touched the dog's coat. His eyes became misty, and in that instant, everything else seemed to disappear. A lone tear traced down the dog's face, glistening in the overhead light. Workers stood frozen, murmuring among themselves. They hadn't learned the backstory yet, but they recognized they were observing something extraordinary. The man's thoughts traveled back to his initial encounter with this dog, back when the shepherd was merely an awkward puppy with oversized ears. He had been placed in a canine training initiative during his law enforcement career. This specific pup had immediately distinguished himself from his littermates. They spent months training side by side, developing a connection founded on mutual respect and endless hours of dedication. The dog mastered his instructions with remarkable accuracy, yet it was his devotion, unwavering and complete, that truly made him special. Then everything transformed in a single day. A work-related injury forced the man into early retirement, and the department relocated the dog elsewhere. He had battled to keep his partner, but department policies prevented it. Their separation had been abrupt and without farewell. He had believed their journeys would never intersect again. Yet here they stood, years later, two lives marked by time, reuniting in the most improbable location. Following his reassignment, the shepherd had been paired with a different handler. However, the connection wasn't comparable. Without the consistent voice and recognizable commands of the man he trusted, the dog faced difficulties. Shelter records would later suggest neglect, extended periods of isolation, incomplete training, and eventually placement with a civilian family who viewed him merely as an inconvenience. When that household relocated, they abandoned him. He wandered the streets, searching for scraps, surviving through instinct and determination alone. When animal control officers discovered him, he was malnourished, injured, and suspicious of anyone who approached. The shelter team had classified him as challenging, observing how he isolated himself and avoided interaction with potential adopters. Nobody knew his background. Nobody comprehended the dedication he had once offered or the connection he had lost. Until this moment, because the instant he spotted that recognizable face at his kennel entrance, all those missing years seemed to vanish. The staff watched breathlessly as the man opened the kennel latch. The door swung open gradually, its soft creak nearly masked by the gentle whimper emerging from the shepherd. For one heartbeat, the dog remained still, simply gazing at the man as though ensuring this wasn't another cruel disappointment. Then, suddenly he lunged forward. The shepherd pressed himself against the man's chest, tail now wagging wildly, paws shaking with pure joy. The man collapsed to his knees, embracing the familiar form tightly. "I've got you now," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. The dog nestled his head into the man's shoulder, releasing a sound that wasn't quite a bark or growl, just a deep, painful cry of pure relief. Throughout the facility, silence fell. Even the typical symphony of barking seemed to halt momentarily. The volunteers understood they were witnessing far more than a simple happy reunion. This represented something precious, two spirits who had rediscovered each other despite impossible circumstances. After the dog had settled enough to stop shaking, the man rose and approached the reception area. "I need to bring him home," he declared, his voice firm yet heavy with feeling. The facility director, having overseen countless adoptions, immediately recognized this situation was unique. She pushed the documentation forward, reviewing the standard procedures, but each step was expedited with obvious urgency, as though everyone understood these two had already waited far too long. While the man completed his information, the shepherd remained pressed against his side, unwilling to allow even the smallest gap to form between them. "What's his name?" the director inquired. The man's face brightened slightly. "Ranger. It's always been Ranger." By the time the last signature was complete, several workers had assembled nearby, some with moistened eyes watching the scene unfold. The man knelt down again, placing his palm on Ranger's head. "You're coming home with me, boy. Permanently this time." Ranger's tail struck the ground once, deliberate and confident, as though he comprehended every single word. When the final document was processed and stored, the shelter entrance opened to the crisp afternoon breeze. Ranger stepped outside first, his paws meeting the gravel, as if it were new territory he could finally claim as his own. The workers gathered in the doorway, some offering waves, others simply observing with quiet satisfaction. Several had tears streaming down their faces. They had never witnessed him voluntarily leave his enclosure, much less with such unwavering confidence. The man guided him toward a pickup truck parked close by. In the rear seat, a thick cushion was laid out next to a brand-new water dish and a small collection of toys. Ranger paused briefly before jumping inside, turning in a circle once, then settling down with a deep, satisfied exhale. The man closed the door carefully, walking to the driver's position. "Time to head home," he said softly. As they drove away, Ranger lifted his head to observe the shelter fading in the side mirror, leaving behind the location where he had been lost and traveling toward the place where he truly belonged. The highway extended before them, peaceful and open. Yet within the vehicle, the atmosphere was filled with something unspoken, a tranquility that comes from being precisely where you're supposed to be. Ranger placed his head against the man's arm, his eyes partially closed, trusting the journey to bring them somewhere secure. He looked down at his companion and grinned. "We've been given another chance, buddy. Let's make the most of it." Sometimes the most meaningful rescues aren't about saving them. They're about saving one another.